I am Abby Waters, and this is Alan Kamen. I'm a
Hello.
filmmaker. Hey, Alan. And we also have with us Audrey.
Semi.
um, and we are going to be hosting an audio description for beginners. So just a little bit about ourselves and then what audio description is. I'm a filmmaker, um, currently have some short films on festival circuit, um, and I am based in South Louisiana. Uh, Alan, you want to talk about who you are and what your history is?
Uh, I am a musician, a pianist. My preference is towards jazz music, and I've originally from New York, and I've moved down here for about 9.5 years now, almost 9.5. And I moved down here in New Orleans because I fell in love with the music and I realized my vacations were growing from a few days to a few weeks, almost a month. And I figured I'm tired of New York and the craziness and those brown snowbanks that we Northerners have become accustomed to. Uh, and I met Abby through our church, and she was gracious enough to have me do the music for another one of her films, shorts, Chicken Bones, well worth going to see. And I told her how in the past, sometimes I've seen audio description, and sometimes it can be very good, where the person knows how to leave enough space and enough imagination for your own interpretation. And other times it can be like sitting next to someone who you feel like telling, shut the F up, enough already, where they just keep on talking and talking and talking. And I think with this one, you'll find it's pretty much on the mark. What you might want to do when you watch the version without the audio description to get an idea how someone like me might uh, either need it or not need it is put on blindfolds and have a friend or a partner describe the movie to you and then watch it again where you can see it and then watch it just to hear it again and see it again with the audio description.
So, and I think we're going to do a little bit of that today, but to give people, because I think even when I have mentioned audio description to people, a lot of people kind of assume I'm talking about closed captions or subtitles, and that's actually not at all what we're talking about. Audio description is the opposite. It is describing with audio, with sound, with voiceover narration, the image on the screen, beyond just the soundtrack of the video, so that people with a visual impairment, or even if you were just driving and you wanted to watch a movie while you were driving, you could have it described to you. It's something that's used in film. It's also used a lot by docents and museums. We've known it originally from its art form. Um, and um, Alan, so do you want to talk a little bit about your work as a producer and just kind of like I know that was news to me that you had done TV production, but that's a pretty cool kind of piece of clout to share about what
Yeah,
you've done.
actually, I was the first blind person to host and produce a cable show up in Manhattan on the Manhattan Neighborhood Network. It was called the Electronic Loft Party. And basically, what it was a half hour interview show. So I would go out and record with my ex wife. She would do the videos of various concerts, whether it would be up in New York, out in the suburbs, or down here. And I'd interview whoever was performing and essentially give them a chance to promote what they were doing at the time. And after that, it meant that I had to go into one of the cubicles at MNN and mix it down and edit it. And back then, things were more analog, or at least at their facilities. So sometimes it would mean uh, mixing the audio with the voiceover saying what it was like for the intro of the show. And sometimes it would mean talking a little bit about the person with playing snippets of their music in the background. And sometimes also the editing would entail uh, splicing together parts from an interview that was too long for that half hour, or uh, splicing together different segments.
Yeah, so you know, as you can see, Alan is somebody who I think is very special in many ways. Not only does he have that history, but also um, uh, he has perfect pitch, right? Isn't that what you say? I mean, the way I
Yeah,
started working with Alan is essentially um, he's now scored, whether he realizes it or not, he's scored all of like three of my films. And part of it is uh, we go to church together, and he regularly will just walk by a piano, sit down, and start playing something absolutely gorgeous and heart filling. And so through meeting him that way, he's continued to work with me. And it was in working with him that I realized, as someone who's never considered audio description as something important, um, I didn't want to be making something with someone that couldn't have full access to it. So that was kind of what got me into doing it. And when I started doing it, um, I I just realized what a gift it is for everyone, but obviously especially for people who cannot see fully um, what is being projected. But it really is kind of just a wonderful, I think, experience on its own to have an audio described visual experience. It's really awesome. Um, so I'm going to put some things on the screen for people who are going to be watching this. So they have a little bit of just kind of general. Right now, I am sharing a PowerPoint, and I am trying to find wherever the play thing is. Slideshow, here we go. That says audio description for beginners, and it introduces the facilitators, myself and Alan. And I'm not going to read through all of this because it's kind of dense, but I will provide this PowerPoint for people to have in addition to the video. And it just talks about, so first, audio description is also referred to as video description. Described video or visual description, it's a form of narration used to provide information surrounding key visual elements in a media work. For the benefit of blind and visually impaired consumers, these narrations are typically placed during natural pauses in the audio and sometimes overlap dialogue if deemed necessary. So we're going to talk a little bit about that later on, kind of where you want to include audio description, how you want to integrate that into the soundtrack and the dialogue that's already happening without taking away from that dialogue.
And also how much of it,
Right.
or how much of the description you want just to be description, or description with the slant towards the creator's interpretation of the movie.
Right. Yeah. So when we start talking about the specifics, that is a good point that we'll cover is tonality. And Alan has some interesting thoughts about that, as well as we'll talk about casting. But so the mission of the audio description is to make audiovisual material accessible by means of concisely conveying plot critical and or character integral information that would otherwise be missed by a blind or low vision viewer. And when you are doing this, you want to use your best judgment to be mindful of time constraints, to determine the amount of detail, avoid over describing, don't include visual images that are not vital to the understanding or enjoyment of the scene, allow room for dialogue, sound effects, music, intentional silence, plot pertinent dialogue, and songs should always be priority. And to remember that when describing actions, not everything needs to be included. Use your own judgment on what is relevant for the story to flow without impacting the experience. And you want to think about as well how much information people can actually process in the amount of time. And the video that we are using is a really interesting video to experiment with because it's almost no dialogue and it's incredibly visually bizarre. So making it was a lot, making the audio description specifically involved a lot of thinking and planning. So when you're describing, you want to describe the who and the what. This slide gives some specifics on how to manage things like credits, how to manage background and setting, and again thinking about prioritizing and your kind of bottom line being what is conveying information that maybe someone who's watching is just subconsciously getting, that is informing the story that someone who's not watching the film and is just listening might miss. She makes a gesture and bats her eyelids at the man, something like that. Like there's so many little cues that we pick up on, even a cue that is maybe a thematic cue, like everyone in the room is wearing neutral colors except the main character who's in a stark red, cherry red dress, like these things that we are picking up on visually that someone who is just listening is going to completely miss if it's not described. So the who and the what, and the how. So this is the bit about tone. So I've been talking a lot. Alan, do you want to talk a little bit about tone and audio description?
Well, that's why I was saying maybe it would be interesting for whoever is going to watch this to learn about audio description is in the way that it should be done correctly.
Okay.
Maybe that's why it might be interesting if they put on blindfolds and watched it with someone else and had that other person describe what was going on, and then go back and watch it with the audio description, and then maybe see the film in their own eyes for the third time.
So then maybe the move should be, why don't we go ahead and roll the video or the audio of the audio description and film that we've worked on until the real thing comes along. Then we can come back and talk about the how and that experience, and then we can play it again with the video. How does that sound?
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to, for a moment, stop my share. And I am going to see if I can share. I want to share the Vimeo link. Share sound, optimize video. See. All right, so are you all seeing this screen? What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna play. Let's make sure we can hear sound. Now play.
Actually, what I'm going to do is stop my video, so if I move the phone, that won't be as a distraction.
Yeah. What
And
about
once you start showing the film, I'll mute my audio so there won't be any background noise from here.
Okay. Okay. And I'm gonna play it and I'm gonna take it off the screen maybe, so we're just hearing it, if that's possible. I don't know if that's possible actually. Oh, here we go. Audrey, I'm gonna hit play. Will you let me know if you hear sound?
Yeah, I can do that.
Words appear. This is a short film by
How'd it go?
Yeah, I heard it.
Is it okay, the connection?
Yes, it's working great.
Okay, great. So this is about 13 minutes. We're gonna let this roll and we can have our videos on black and just listen.
Words appear. This is a short film by Abby Waters, with art by Alia Fawaz and Henry Matisse, featuring Miley Zox and Nick Person as arguing couple in frame paintings, Jim Schaefer as tall man with cart, and Alia Fawaz as artist. Light pours over the wood floors of a bright New Orleans apartment. A man in a blue shirt and a woman in a burnt red dress enter the front door.
Wow.
On either side of the door hangs an impressionistic painting, one mostly blue, the other burnt red.
Steven, what are you doing? Take your shoes off. My God, do you even care about the floors?
The woman storms away.
And I'm really frustrated with you, Steven.
The man follows.
Gigi, didn't you have fun last night?
No. As a matter of fact, I did not have fun. Because nothing.
The two
was
paintings
there.
each come into focus. The blue is of a ghost white, faceless lady on a balcony with a blue umbrella. The burnt red, a woman in white lying in a pool of red and gold. Suddenly, there is a transformation. The woman from the arguing couple is in fact now the painting. Her burnt red hair and face poke awkwardly through a white portrait frame as she blinks at her new reality. She wears a white top and a red skirt with a white tutu. The man, now also suddenly turned into a painting with a frame strapped to his head, stands in a white dress. Blue highlights his facial contours and he holds a cartoonishly two-dimensional poster board, painted and shaped into a blue umbrella. The two grasp at the frames, encompassing their faces as they begin to mime back and forth to each other. Playing peekaboo and giggling, they make faces across the room and explore the real world of movement and life.
He did not have a good time. He was practically crying the entire time. I am no longer.
The couple
going to
returns
be
as the two framed paintings look on with growing sadness.
Just be around when you're going all crazy, and I am supposed to just do all the work. Forget it.
As the couple enter and exit the shot, the paintings themselves come in and out of life, made into humanoid, picture frame face clowns embodied by the same actors playing the arguing couple.
Goodbye.
And so, standing by the wall, the two clowns watch their own breakup as they themselves try and break free from their picture frames.
Out, Steven. I'm literally so done.
The woman throws the man's clothes at the door, nearly hitting herself as the red painting in the face with a shoe.
Fine.
Get out. Get out. I'm so sick of this.
The man
Go.
scrambles to
Just
shove
go.
clothes in a
Get out.
suitcase.
Better. Goodbye, Steven.
Just as he's leaving, he rips the lifeless blue painting from the wall. Now abandoned, the red painting reaches out in despair, longing for her blue partner. Outside, the man tosses his framed blue painting into the front seat of his truck before driving away. Just as the passenger seat window rolls down, the blue painting pops his human head out in defeat. The screen goes to black. Title card. Until the real thing comes along. The man enters a new apartment, drinks a beer. He hangs his blue painting on an empty wall. The scene turns from day to night, and festive lights shine on the blue painting. And then again in human form, the blue painting sits awkwardly in a chair. Mardi Gras beads encircle his neck and picture frame. He clutches his blue cartoon umbrella. Beside him, a woman drinks and talks and hands him a blunt. On the other side of him, a couple makes out on a Victorian couch. The blue painting, annoyed and alone, takes a pull of his weed. Mardi Gras beads fly out of nowhere and smack the poor humanoid painting in the face. It falls to the floor, returning again to a 2D picture, before a hand suddenly brushes away the beads covering it to reveal the image beneath, the painting of the blue and white faceless lady. A beautiful woman in a leather jacket carries the 2D painting away in the basket of her bike. She rides through downtown at night, lights blink in orbs of color on the screen. Once home, she parks the old bike and enters her house. Now in daylight, we see it as an artist's home. Paintbrushes, color palettes, green plants, and knickknacks are strewn throughout. Half-painted faces on canvases are stacked. The images harken to the impressionism of the blue painting, which she now places in full view of a brand new canvas. The easel set and ready with the blue painting for inspiration. The artist prepares to paint. We see the red painting again, lifeless and tossed in a broken cardboard box outside a dumpster. A tall man with a grocery cart rolls up. Seeing the piece, he places it in his cart before continuing to meander. A fully formed humanoid painting again. The woman from the arguing couple is pushed along in the cart by the tall man. The white wooden frame strapped to her face and her burnt red skirt stand out against the background of graffitied warehouses and alleyways as the man pushes along his new treasure. She points this and that way from inside the cart until they arrive at a grocery. The painting returns to 2 dimensions as the man lifts it from the cart to hang on the outer wall of the store. Just as suddenly, there she is again. The painting in humanoid form now stands against the wall. This time, the man directs the painting, coaxing her to sidle sneakily into the store. She obliges and returns with a big smile and a tutu full of cans of beer that make a dash for it in the cart. They are hitting it off. The tall man with the cart and the humanoid red painting sit in the grass, sharing an evening picnic. A streetcar passes. They are joking, enjoying beers and Chinese food. The red painting is very chatty, comfortable with her new friend. Night falls. The red painting is now pushing the tall man, beer drunk, in the cart past an old theme park. She stops for a moment beneath a giant statue of Little Bo Peep and Humpty Dumpty, holding a sign that says Storyland. The red painting looks into the camera from inside her awkwardly framed face. Loitering at the park, the painting swings in the fresh air while the man, exasperated, throws out his last cigarette. We see the two on a busy street underneath a highway overpass. The man holds a cardboard sign that reads, "For sale," as the red painting now sits betrayed, frustrated, and on display at the corner. They try advertising in another location, a church. The man sits waiting as she pouts through the wooden picture frame on her head. The painting is now back to 2D, being pushed in the cart by the tall man. They pass a corner bar. The beautiful artist is sitting at a table outside, noticing the frame in the cart. She hurries over to negotiate and purchase the red piece. She hands the tall man cash and runs gleefully to her seat. The bartender clears her glasses. A new evening. The artist alone on a levee sketches in burnt red. She experiments with impressionistic faces and drinks from a bottle of red wine. Tugboats tug by in the sunset. The New Orleans cityscape glimmers in the night on the Mississippi River's horizon. Another day, the rain pours down on the artist hustling along a sidewalk. She spots a blue umbrella and stops. At first, it is the painted two-dimensional one that the blue painting held before. And then, with her touch, it becomes real, and she holds it above her head, never noticing the change. Continuing down the sidewalk, she spots a burnt red fire hydrant with a white tutu wrapped around it. She yanks the costume piece from the hydrant and takes it with her as she goes. Once home again, the artist waters the plants scattered throughout her house. She goes to work. Images of paintbrushes and paint clash and fade in and out, cut between flashbacks of the arguing couple. Close-ups of the fighting couple's eyes align with close-ups of the painting's eyes quietly closing inside their frames. Until we land, finally, on the sleeping face of the artist. The two ladies from the paintings, red and blue, are now walking together on a new canvas as the artist dreams. Audio description narrated by Jason Mendoza with consultation by Alan Kamen. Other credits follow.
Okay. So coming back on.
And I'm back.
So I wonder, this would be a great time for some input. I'm not sure, Audrey, if you had a chance to kind of focus in on it or how that experience was for you, but it's interesting to hear feedback from someone who hasn't seen it yet.
What about you, Adrian? Audrey.
Yeah. Yeah, I was listening. Yeah, I mean, I what kind of feedback, I guess, were you looking for?
I guess it's a so it's have you seen it yet?
No, I kind of hid it while it was playing, so I just kind
Okay.
of got the audio stuff of it.
Okay.
Mhm.
So it's kind of a complex, clearly it's a complex situation to be describing visually. So
Mhm.
I'm curious just if the narrative, uh, if you kind of understood the story of what was going on, how you felt with it, you know, did you understand the actions, what was happening, the relationships? Yeah, how was that experience for you? And don't be scared to give, critical feedback. This is a constant kind of dialogue, and we continue to make these descriptions better. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's not like a way that I'm used to experiencing
Yeah.
films. So it was I did find myself kind of like coming in and out of um like following the actions.
Mm-hmm.
Um but I could definitely tell that there was a like a lot of thought put into it.
Mm-hmm.
Um but yeah, I think if I was more used to that kind of storytelling and like that kind of experience, then I think I think it was done really well.
See, my question to you would be, did you think there was too much or too little description? Because the first time when I saw this and listened to it, I told Abby I thought it was too much at the time and that the mix could be up and lowered in certain points.
No, I thought it was a good amount of
Well,
description, I think.
you're you're hearing the finalized.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but so that was, I think we can talk a little bit now about the how and process. Getting that feedback from people is really important when you're making these audio tracks because, like Alan was saying, you know, you don't want to flood people with so much noise that they can't process what you're saying, or that they can't process the emotionality of it. It's kind of like, I think it was Coltrane who said, there's as much emotion in the not playing as there is in the playing. So it's kind of, as Alan, as a jazz musician, knows, like, you have to balance the silence as well. But Alan, why did you have that initial reaction, you think, in the beginning, and how does it compare to stuff that you hear on Netflix? They do a lot of audio description.
Well,
How's that? Yeah.
what came to mind in particular, which is why I also had suggested having the person maybe watch it blindfolded and having a friend or someone describe what was going on to them without the audio description.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was a movie that came out in the late 90s called Angel Heart. And I remember I was watching it with some friends at our apartment. And at one point, there was a very wild romantic scene with Mickey Rourke and Lisa Bonet. And then a few years later, I noticed it was on Netflix or maybe HBO, one of those services, but it said it had audio description. And I was curious just to see how much more I would have, or maybe how much less I would get from it. And that particular scene was so sterilized by the description, whereas our friends who were watching us, their reaction was like, oh my God, they're really going at it. And on the audio description, it was like, she walks into the room, they look at each other, they turn left and they turn right and they stare and they start to undress each other and they take each other's clothes off wildly. Then they jump on the bed and he straddles her and they move up and down in a series of movements leading to a climactic conclusion.
I see
And
what
that
you mean by sterile. Yeah.
and that's how they described that. And initially when I heard the first version that Jason did, it was in parts of it, it was almost like overload in a sense, because he was either saying too much or saying it too quickly or not leaving enough breathing space to take in what was going on at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, since there wasn't really any dialogue, and part of the movie's idea was to visually see it and hear the musical accompaniment in the background, and also the ambient sound of like the
Mm-hmm.
traffic and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the initial version didn't give enough room to appreciate that or take that in.
Mm-hmm. And this was I think the conversation that Alan and I had around how much the description should be covering the ambient sound or the dialogue is an important conversation, because, for example, with this film, and why I think the filmmaker themselves, the director, needs to be directly involved in the creation of the audio description, because no one else working just post-production would have known that actually these two were improving dialogue the whole time, and the dialogue was never important to us as a part of the film. So I had no problem creating an audio description that kind of overrode the dialogue, but that's for this film in specific. In other films, I would I've made, I would be very careful to ever have the audio description in the same breath as the dialogue. So that's something that like it's all tempered to the film that you're making. Another piece that Alan touched on is this idea of sterility and neutrality. A lot of networks will say that you want your audio description to be neutral, but I think there's no law of audio description. There's no police here, so it is kind of up to the filmmaker how neutral or how thematically related the person cast is, or their emphasis is. So I think this is something too where I'd love to hear from Alan, like what's your opinion on a neutral narrator versus a narrator who gives emotional emphasis on what they're describing?
Well, the neutral narrator is really, it's really just leaving, depending on how the descriptive words are, it's leaving it then up to how that person might interpret it. There was one part where the woman looks out and then she comes towards the other person when he takes the painting or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be, I know there's a symbolism that you want there, but the way that was described left that interpretation up to me, as opposed to maybe my interpretation of that particular scene might be slightly different than what you had intended, or it might be different than what the person who might be watching it with me or someone else in the theater might have interpreted it as.
Mm-hmm.
But if the audio description is more neutral, then it leaves the viewing more up to the person hearing that, and then that's more their experience than the experience of, say, what the director or the creator of the film might want, because not everyone always gets the same thing out of a film when it's released, which is why some people like or hate a film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think kind of summarizing what you said, it another reason why the filmmaker should be deeply involved in this process is you're making decisions on what you want left open to interpretation by directing the narration, the emotionality of the narration. So you have, as the director, as a filmmaker, you have yet another funnel or filter through which to channel how much is the audience going to have open to their own interpretation, how much am I going to tell them through the emotionality or the words used. And those are two different levels, because we could have, you know, Jason, our narrator, describing something completely without any tonality, but very symbolic language. And that's one way to give information, but keep his presentation tone neutral. Or the presentation tone can have effect, and the language be also descriptive or not. So there are several layers in which you have the opportunity to leave interpretation. So yeah, I think like this is it's wild to me to not, if you were to make audio description, I think you would be doing a disservice to not make it yourself, or have or direct the audio description itself. Another thing that I want to bring up that Alan and I talked about is contrast. So when you're thinking about kind of voice casting, what kind of voice do you want to cast? And again, this is like, there's no police, there's no laws here. But there is, you know, there are a few frames in which you can view this. One is like, if you're watching a teeny bopper movie, like, do you want a 70-year-old man sounding narrator? No, you probably want a younger high school narrator. So there's some aspects that you want to relate to the theme, but then there's also the idea that you don't want it to blend in too much to the sound so that people don't easily unconsciously pick up on the difference between the description and the actual soundtrack. So Alan, tell us a little bit what your kind of preferences are in terms of who the narrator is and how it relates to what's being narrated.
Well, I would want the narrator to be someone whose voice was distinctively different enough from, at least from the main characters in a movie. And if it's a lot of open space or space where the music background might be somber or bassier sounding, lower pitches, then I would want a woman with a relatively high or higher type voice. Say someone like yours, Abby. But in other cases, if the music is lighter sounding music, or if the ambient sound is more airy sounding, then a good contrast would be a male's voice speaking, just because the timbres would upset each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what about what do you think about accent and that kind of thing in terms of how it relates to the film.
Well, there's when I was growing up for broadcasting, they said the type of accent that people should try to have when they were doing radio shows as a DJ was that like Minnesotan type accent,
White bread.
white bread, non-specific to an area, generic almost.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, I think that's why you will not see a movie with audio description with someone talking with a real Southern accent or something,
Mm-hmm.
because then that sort of takes on the role like some films will actually do, where they'll have one of the characters as the narrator explaining a lot of stuff.
Mm.
There was a show on TV a while back called The Wonder Years
Yeah.
that did that. The narrator was an older version of Kevin.
Right. Right. So this is an interesting subject to breach, I guess, because I can understand wanting to avoid someone being confused by the description being a character. But I think there's also an argument for having a narrator that has some tonality matching. So like I'm curious in your experience, Alan, like if have you ever watched, I don't know, like a foreign film that has an English audio description and is it audio described with an accent?
I've seen foreign films that were dubbed into English. I've
Uh-huh.
never actually seen one with audio description, though.
Mm-hmm. What would be,
Not that they don't exist,
yeah.
but I think in a case like that, it would be the same parameters because if I'm hearing the film in English, the description, unless it's a narrative description, should be in my native tongue in English.
Mm-hmm. So in general, you hear audio description as with, I guess, I hate to say without accent because I don't think that exists, but you see it to be uh
It's almost like reading a book
mhm,
in a sense.
mhm. So there is a generic kind of English uh American neutral accent that you hear it in mostly.
Well, that become accustomed to hearing it in
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or trained to hear it in.
Mm-hmm. And how do you feel about that, like as an experience? Do you wish that there were more accented narrators that go along with the theme of the film, or would you find that confusing? Do you almost need it to sound technical and
It would have to
mhm,
fit with the film. Say if it was a film that was set in the South. If it was
mhm,
set in the South, then maybe a Southern sounding audio narrative could work.
mhm,
But
mhm,
say for a film like this one, well, like the other one that I saw of yours, Chicken Bones, which was set in the South actually, but it was almost generic. It happened
Mm-hmm.
to be in the South because of the events, but
Mm-hmm.
those events could have happened anywhere in the country
Mm-hmm.
to some extent.
Yeah.
And I think in that case, hearing a regional dialect for the description would have been a detriment rather than a plus for it.
Mm-hmm. So it really
But
is case by case.
yeah, whereas, for example, maybe watching a Woody Allen movie, hearing someone talk kind of like Woody,
Yeah.
that might have been a good
Audio
descriptive.
description. Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, I think what I want to do now is play the the video version that does not have the audio description so that the folks who heard it the first time can now see what it looks like without the audio description. So I'm going to
Okay.
share and play that for the next 13 minutes, I think.
And I will mute.
Okay, let's see. Let me get out of here. It's this. Put non-video off.
Wow. Steven, what are you doing? Take your shoes off.
Sorry.
My God, do you even care about the floors? And I'm really frustrated with you, Steven.
Gigi, didn't you have fun last night?
No. As a matter of fact, I did not have fun. Because nothing was prepared. All of the different things you were supposed to do. You're supposed to get lemons and limes. And you were supposed to do... Practically crying the entire time. I am no longer going to be subject to your whims and just be around when you're going all crazy and I am supposed to just do all the work. Forget it. Forget it. You know what? Forget it. No, nothing was going well, and that's why you're getting out, Steven. We're literally done. No cup of tea, no nothing. Goodbye. Finish. Adios. No, that's yours. You're going.
Calm down for a second.
No. Get out, Steven. I'm literally so done.
My clothes.
I'm so done.
Oh, God, fine.
Get out. Get out. I'm so sick of this. Go. Just go. Because I'm better. Goodbye, Steven.
Okay. So coming back on.
I should be back.
So yeah, much different without the audio description and with the video. Alan, how did it feel listening to it without the video? Or
Well,
without the audio or video? The audio
actually, I watched it 3 times. The first time I watched it this way after you sent it to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Sharon came over, I had her watch it with me, and she gave me her interpretation of what she was seeing, which was pretty close to the idea that you wanted to present for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I watched it with the first version of the audio description.
Mm-hmm.
But this with certain films, you don't really need an audio description. But with films like this, or obviously even more so with the silent film or foreign film, uh, audio description was very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Or going to see it with someone who could be my personal audio description. And if we were at a movie theater, drive the people crazy.
Yeah. So I want to we're kind of rounding out on time. And I want to let people who are filmmakers know just a little bit about the technical aspects of making the audio description files so that people can do this for themselves, or you can contact me and I can help you through it. But it's not hard to do, and it's something that should be included as an option. So if you're creating a DCP for a film festival, or for to send out to a distributor, um, and you can actually make a DCP yourself. There are companies who will charge you, hundreds of dollars to make a DCP, but you can do it yourself. And a DCP is just the digital cinema package. That is the format that major theater screens will request. When you're making the audio content for that, the program Handbrake, which is a free program you can make a DCP with. Again, instead of spending hundreds of dollars and outsourcing it, you can do it yourself for free. And when you do it yourself for free, you have the option of adding a VI track. So the VI stands for visually impaired. And there's also an HI track, hearing impaired. But so what you'll want to do is when you're creating that file and you run it through the DCP maker, you'll put in your video track that has the video file, and then for the audio, you're going to select an 8-track option, and so you'll then select with each of those 8 tracks, you'll leave the empty ones empty. So if you're doing a 5.1 Dolby surround, you'll have your left, right, center, and your equalizer and surrounds. And then you'll just skip any tracks that you're not using. And then same for stereo. And you can just look this stuff up online. Like there are plenty of people who have threads on Reddit that explain how to do this. This is how I learned to do it, and it works great. And then the easier route too is if you're not making a DCP and you're just creating an MP4 or a MOV file that you're sending, just a digital download, quick download, you'll want to ask the festival if they like the track to be separate from the cinema track. So are you having just a clean narration that is then paired in the cinema with the video, or are you delivering a track that includes the movie sound with the audio description already burned in? So that would be a question that you'd want to ask directly. Do you want me to give you a separate track that includes the movie file with the narration over it, or do you want just the description isolated as its own track and sent as a separate file? So these are just the kind of questions you'll want to ask if you're giving your film to Netflix or something like that. They have in their website the specs for how they want it uploaded. And so it's very honestly very minimal legwork. It seems complicated, but it is not at all. The legwork is in really having these conversations about what makes a good description and writing it out, and then recording it with a good quality. You shouldn't, I mean, I don't think you should be, doing something that you haven't like worked through. But I don't think that there is as big of a barrier to entrance to making these as maybe people are afraid that there is. There's not. It just takes the time of writing something well and recording it well, and then the technical is really pretty straightforward and can be helped. So that's kind of my comments on that. Audrey, as our sole audience, do you have any questions? I can also leave. I don't know. Does the chat get recorded?
I think the chat may get recorded if I'm viewing it.
Okay.
But I can also include whatever information you need and like with the recording.
Yeah, I just you can put my email out to people, and Alan's. I'm sure Alan would love to watch some stuff if people ever have questions or want consultation. But we're,
Yep. One
both
thing
happy to do that. Yeah.
One thing you could do is put links to both versions of the film up there, so if they want, they can watch those separately and then view this Zoom discussion.
Yeah, we'll do. I think that's a great idea. We can include that.
Well, one thing people really have to take into account when they put together an audio description is the time of the physical time of what individual descriptive phrases you might want to put in. And then that gets, then you have to edit that into the space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When we were recording ours, there were moments where, Jason, the narrator, could be listening and kind of live record it. And then there were other moments where it was too much back and forth between moments of pause and dialogue. And so we just recorded the statements and I kind of parsed them out. So creating that edit is something that you definitely want to put some thought into. Mm-hmm. Well, unless you have any questions, Audrey.
No, I don't personally have any questions. I think it's a very thorough, informative presentation.
Cool. Well,
Great.
yeah. So I think we can stop records.
Yeah, I will stop recording.